Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show this evening. It promises, as usual, to be another insightful show as we talk to Professor Bolaji Akinyemi on various international issues. Prof, again, you are welcome to the show tonight, sir.
Thank you very much. I am happy to be here. And as usual, I look forward to the participation by our viewers.
All right, Prof. For today, Nigeria marked 60 years since independence. And you were a young adult at the time when independence took place. Do you want to take us down memory lane? What are some of the things you remember around that time of independence?
Um, hmm, that's 60 years ago. I was only 18 at that time. Um, but an event that took place before independence is probably part of the background to my memory. And that was the Queen uh, visiting Nigeria. And I think I was about 15 at that time. And I was in secondary school in Lagos. And we were all, of course, marched out to some playground that I can't remember now, and where she took a drive round the grounds and we were waving the Union Jack um, to welcome her. Um, and what just struck me was, my God, uh, at that time, what struck me was, my God, she's so young. Um, I wasn't too clear in my mind the structure of the British government. I knew she was part of it somehow, and of course that there were prime ministers and so on. But that's such a young person. will be carrying the burden of when Nigeria was part of the British colonies. So that struck me and stood at the back of my mind. When independence took place, when it came, even at that time, I was not happy that those whom I felt should actually lead us because of their role in the struggle for independence had now been sidelined. Again, at my age, remember, it wasn't too clear in my mind, this mechanism of elections, voting, and what have you, that will lead to, people who were the forefront nationalists now having to play either second fiddle or no fiddle at all in the leadership of the country. And I was puzzled by that. And I thought this thing called electoral democracy, there must be something wrong, with it. However, that's what took place. And of course, my father had been elected a member of the House of Representatives for the Independence Parliament. That was the parliament that saw us to independence. My father was an MP. Well, so I kind of figure, what his role was going to be as an MP, again, apart from, he would take part in debates. So you could see, personal issues impinging on my perception of the larger stage of the nation. But we were happy on one thing, that at least finally Ghana will stop insulting Nigeria. Because Ghana had become independent in 1957, I believe. And they were always rubbing it in that we were still colonies while they had become independent, and they were the leading voice in Africa on the world stage. And, we were still modeling our way through. We were quite happy that finally, we become independent and now at par with Ghana. But I must again also say that even at that young age, Nkrumah made a better impression on us, people of my age. I was in Form 6 then, made an impression on us than our own prime minister. And we wished that our own prime minister would be as active on the world stage as Nkrumah was. And then, of course, we had the assassination of Lumumba in the Congo. And even though I didn't take part in the demonstration because I was in secondary school, I followed very, as active mentally as I could, the demonstrations that took place and the condemnation. I've always loved reading newspapers. So, I would devour very assiduously all the writing in the Daily Times then. Daily Times was the leading, newspaper. The interesting thing was
Wow.
that our teacher, as I said, I was in upper six. Our teacher in social studies was an Englishman. So I'm afraid, I hope I didn't embarrass him by the kind of questions that I asked. Why did you kill Lumumba? What for? In any case, why did it take so long to give us independence? And he was a Cambridge educated gentleman. Um, but I think he had a good sense of humor. He was a young man, had a good sense of humor, and we will have this long, great debate in my social studies class. So
Well,
I think that that's
Prof,
what I remember.
at,
Yes.
at that time, had you started to take interest in foreign policy? Because you've really picked up the Queen coming in, what was going on in Ghana with their independence and things like that. Those memories stuck. Were you already forming that sense of your love and your passion for diplomacy at that young age?
Yes, I was. But there is again a twist to the story. My elder brother by that time was in the university and he was studying medicine. So I figured I also will study medicine since that's what he was doing. And I started doing science subjects at my, upper six. I started doing science subjects, biology, zoo, physics, chemistry, and then of course social science. And I took the exam, but my housemaster called me after the exams and he said to me, if you study medicine with 100% of your intellect, you will be an ordinary doctor. If you study diplomacy with 50% of your intellect, you will be a first class diplomat. Therefore, I encourage you to change your course.
Your
And that's what I did.
housemaster, your housemaster.
Yes, my housemaster, he was also teaching us zoology. Uh, he was teaching us zoology. Uh, and so that's why I changed. I figured he knows what he was talking about.
Did you ever go back to thank him for that advice, Prof?
I don't think so because I left the country as soon as I finished my higher school certificate exam. I left the country, and so I didn't have cause to go back to the school. But you are right, that was an omission. When I came back, by the time I came back to teach at the University of Ibadan, 10 years had elapsed. But I should have found my way back to that college to thank him.
Wow, because it strikes me as
He's
you,
dead now.
yes,
Pardon?
as you were saying that, Prof, what struck me is the role that teachers play in the educational sector in shaping the future of people by giving them that kind of advice. But in this day and age, a lot of people regard teachers as a bit of a necessary evil. Let me just get past this thing. I need to do this thing. And they don't have the kind of respect that this particular schoolmaster seems to have had on you in the past?
A good submission on your part and a very grievous mistake by the younger generation. I even regret not having what they call not a motivator. Um, I mean, somebody should have advised me much earlier on so that I would not have spent 2 years doing science subjects. Um, so we are making a mistake in this country and in several African countries. We are making a mistake in not adopting the Finnish educational system or the teaching parameters or the teaching paradigm of Finland. In Finland, you must have a first-class degree to be teachers. Number two, they pay them more than they pay their civil servants. Because in Finland, the thinking is that these teachers, you are surrendering to them your most precious product, your children, who will be in charge of the future. Therefore, they must have the best of the best to mold their brains as they are developing. In Africa and in some of the developing countries, in fact, the teachers are the lowest of the lowest. And people often say, yes, I'm teaching while waiting to move on to something else because they are not very well paid, no motivation, the conditions of service are atrocious. So, while the young people are making a mistake, not respecting the teachers, the government itself is making an atrocious mistake in the way teachers are recruited and teachers are trained. In my time, well, my father was a teacher in the secondary school, and they were ranked amongst what I would call the upper class. They were listened to, they were respected, they molded the characters and the career of a lot of people in my generation. It's not like that now, and that's a mistake we should correct.
Wow. So let's move on from that those early days where you had gone in, you had started to shape your mindset around diplomacy, around foreign policy. You left the country, came back. Now, did you must have had some hopes about Nigeria at the time, given the potential Nigeria had at that time. Do you want to talk to what are some of the things you had hoped you would by now that you would be seeing in Nigeria that you're not seeing?
Nothing illustrates my what my answer is going to be by the fact that I was offered the American green card, which would have led to my becoming an American citizen on a platter of gold. In fact, most people of my generation, this was not unique to me, most people of my generation were offered foreign citizenship because we performed brilliantly our university teachers, professors were so impressed by our talent that they asked us to stay. And we said no, which surprised the Americans at that time because people were, even in the 60s that I'm talking about now, I mean, foreign students will, fall over themselves to enter the United States. And if given the opportunity to remain there, they will grab that opportunity with both hands. Not Nigerians. We said we were going back home. And it was like, why? Because we had a vision of Nigeria going to the moon. And this vision was not based on fallacy. Look, we had Western Nigerian television service, Northern Nigeria television service, Eastern Nigerian television service at a time when some countries in Europe did not have. We had a first-class teaching hospital. And I've been told by people there that even at that time, King Saud of Saudi Arabia used to come there for treatment because some of the best surgeons in the world were in that university. They had been trained in England. They had come back home. They were, fellows of this, fellows of that. They were world renowned and world respected. The indices were so good that we thought Nigeria was going to go to the moon in terms of development. In fact, there was a study done, I think in 1958, that said if Nigeria was going to follow the trajectory of its development, that within 10 years, Nigeria should be more developed than a lot of the countries in Europe. That was the vision and the belief, not just of Nigerians, but of most of the scholars, who came to study Nigeria. So we thought we were coming home to help launch this country on its, developmental trajectory. Unfortunately, it crashed. Those hopes crashed. The vision crashed. And, I know people who died of heartbreak because they just couldn't understand why a country that started off with so much hope will end up in such a mess
Prof,
within 4 years of independence.
Prof, there's a question a lot of people ask, and I know that this kind of cuts across different areas, and there's so many ways we could slice and dice this. But do you recognize a time in this period, this spectrum of time, where one could almost say it went wrong there? That was the major moment we missed this thing. Can you do you recognize an event, an occasion, or something that happened, or was this just one thing leading to another, to another, to another, and suddenly we find ourselves where we are today?
Well, there is a Swahili proverb that says nobody needs to teach you how to fall into a ditch. Take the first step off the edge, and all the other steps will rapidly follow, and you'll find yourself at the bottom of the ditch. To me, Other scholars may disagree. The singular event that stands out in my mind was the contrived declaration of emergency that destroyed the Western region, which was the most progressive of the regions. The arrest of Chief Awolowo, who had just given up the premiership and the leadership of that to go to the House of Representatives, again on contrived charges of planning a military coup d'etat and jailing him when they couldn't prove that on what they call treasonable felony. And that's it. Because you see, Nigeria was built on a tripod of three regions. Now, first of all, let that be a lesson to you. Don't ever build a table on three legs. It's the most unstable construction you could have. Because once something happens to one of the legs, forget it. That table is going to flip. Nigeria was built on a tripod of three regions. The moment they destroyed one of the regions, then that was it. That was the beginning of falling into the ditch for Nigeria. And you then had, civil disobedience following the jailing of Chief Awolowo. You had civil disobedience that then led to a military coup. It then led to a Nigerian civil war, and and that destroyed our federalism, and we are still in that mess till today.
Prof, let's take this journey away from, move it closer to now. Some years back, a former Nigerian president identified the need to try to bring things together. These three legs that you talk about, identified the need to bring things together and called for a national conference. Now, you have said in the past, and I think you even mentioned it in one of your messages earlier on today, the fact that that conference achieved a consensus that was very unique. How did you achieve that consensus during that national conference? Because I think that that's unique for our viewers to hear this. For people who believe everybody can just do what they like, everybody should go in their own separate ways. But for them to understand how that conference brought all these same people who have this diverse background came together and they agreed on something.
Thank you. This gives me the opportunity to pay tribute to the integrity of the chairman of that conference, the late Justice Kutige. He was a nationalist at heart. He was transparent. He had integrity. He had understanding of the need to ensure inclusiveness in the way and manner the conference was handled and the recommendations were adopted. You see, I was the deputy chairman of that conference, and Justice Kutige realized from the very beginning that, yes, he could overrule me if it comes to that. But the moment he saw that he and I shared the same national body language, that he and I shared the same world view about how to redress the grievances within the Nigerian system. And that was the objective of the conference, to address those grievances and to propose the solutions to those grievances. He and I saw eye to eye. The moment Justice Kutige understood that, he sought my cooperation and I gave him 100%, if not 110% cooperation. I was honest with him, and as an older person who probably has seen and experienced more of the system than I listened carefully to him. You see, the game that's often played by cantankerous people within the system is to play one side against the other. And once you do that, and they tried, these cantankerous people who felt that a successful conference was not in their interest tried to knock the heads of Justice Kutige and I together. But they didn't succeed because Justice Kutige was a very honest, a non-political jurist, but who understood what contribution that conference could make towards solving the problems of Nigeria. And I wish he were alive to hear this tribute to him. He was a giant of a Nigerian. And that's why the conference was successful. We addressed, we respected the different views, but we were not going to allow the views of a minority to create problems for us. But at the same time, we were determined that there will be no walkout, that there will be no breakdown, because really, that was the commitment I made to President Jonathan before he agreed to have a conference. He didn't want a conference that will blow up in his face, or a conference that will a conference that will end up in disarray. And I gave him that commitment that there will be no unfair games played in that conference. That's when he then signed on to the conference.
So, Prof, now that conference took place, very successful conference. Um, but we still have some of these issues in Nigeria that the conference sought to address. And some people say that in African countries, we like to have conferences as another means of, let's just have these conversations, let's have this dialogue without real intention to implement the recommendations from the conference. Did you have that sense when this conference was being put together?
No, I believed that, I mean, when people say, well, Africans like to have their conferences, fine. It's better to jojo than to war. And the concept of Ndaba, sitting under a tree in the village to talk out the problems and iron out the problems and come to a consensus, is as African as the African continent itself. And I expected that President Jonathan will implement the decisions of that conference. He gave me that assurance. I'm sorry if I'm using the word me too often. But when he called me in to ask my views about the conference, I asked for commitment from him before I would get involved. And that in exchange for me promising that we will ensure that that conference delivers, he also promised that he would implement the decisions of the conference. One of the tragedies of the Nigerian situation was that the brainchild within his administration, somebody very, very, very close to him, whom he trusted and who was committed to this conference, died of cancer a few weeks after the conference was inaugurated. That was a tragedy for Nigeria, almost equivalent to the assassination of General Murtala Mohammed, who had a clear view of where he wanted to take Nigeria and a vision of the actualization of the dream of Nigeria as the giant of Africa. Because once Oronto Douglas, who was a special advisor, died, there were people within his government who were not committed to the conference. Party people who felt that a successful conference like that was going to diminish their influence. And they played all kinds of games to derail the conference. But give it to President Jonathan, he stood firm by us. However, he could have implemented parts of that conference. I mean, part of the recommendations, especially those that he could do through executive orders. And we prepared volume 1 of the report that shows these are the ones you could do unilaterally using executive orders because they are under your power as the president. Instead, he preferred to wait until after the elections. And unfortunately, the result of the elections didn't follow what he expected. And so again, Nigeria lost another opportunity to address its problems. The new government of President Buhari had a visceral reaction, which till today I still don't understand, to the report of that conference. He didn't want to see it, he didn't want to touch it, and that's a pity.
Is that an African problem, Prof? Because there's a note here on YouTube where someone is saying that was the Western Nigeria television service built by Nigerians? At independence, we were taught we could spend our way into prosperity. Then reality struck. Is it an African thing where we have all these great reports that point to the way forward, but then nobody is brave enough to step up to take the hard decisions?
You see, is it an African problem? I've never looked at it that way. I don't know what the relationship is between well, we're the one who built WNTV. We ran it. There's no magic to you get engineers to build bridges, build railroad, build this, build that. I mean, what's the big deal? When the United States ran into problem about the rockets that will carry its astronauts to the spaceship, it used the Russian one until American private sector could then build rockets that allowed the United States a few months ago to lift its astronauts to the spaceship. It doesn't diminish American status. So I don't know what that means. But, you know, I don't know. I don't know. Because when I keep saying I don't know, is if I were the president of Nigeria, I wouldn't care where a report is coming from, unless I had come to the conclusion that the report will be detrimental to the national interests of the country. And I can assure you that what we have now, the the expansion of the cleavages that divide Nigerians had become so had become so alarming that people like a former president, Obasanjo, a Nobel Prize winner, Wole Soyinka, one of the under recognized war heroes, General Akin, and a lot of others will now be sounding alarm bells. Normally, people say separate the message from the messenger. I think this is one of the occasions when no, the messenger gives substance to the messages that they are carrying. And if these people are sounding alarm bells, and yet you have a report that have been designed to address the issues that are leading to cracks in our structure, then take a look at that report. Or, because there are several reports, there is the Ways report on electoral reform. I served on that committee. Again, it's a report that, if it had been dealt with by President Yaradua, would again have addressed some of these issues. It was never dealt with because President Yaradua took ill, and his ill health affected his receptivity of that report. But that one is there. There is the Obasanjo, the report of the Obasanjo conference. There is the 2014 National Conference report. Then there is the El Rufai report set up by the governing party, the party that is in power now. Let the president collect all those reports, put them in a basket of reports, set up a committee, a task force of maybe not more than 50, and ask them to tease out of all these reports recommendations that can help to pull Nigeria back from the brink. That will form what I will call the Blue Report. Based on the Blue Report, the government will now prepare a white paper, a white report, which will then go to cabinet and then go to the National Assembly. And believe me, President Buhari has the gravitas, the confidence which I have seen him show in the past 1 year to move the National Assembly to approve whatever he sends to them. But to ignore and just carry on business as usual, well, I hate to think of the consequences of that.
Wow. Thank you, Prof, for that very insightful response. And as you have taken us on this journey, thank you so much for that. In this last segment of the show, we want to to deal with this really important situation that's going on in the United States as the elections also draw near. We are starting to see a bit of a pivoting in the way the election is being run with the debate. Firstly, what are your views on the debate that took place a few days ago?
Disgraceful, appalling, very unbecoming. And it is not the fault of Joe Biden. It is the fault of the president himself, who kept interrupting him, wouldn't let him finish his submissions, disregarded the moderators, disregarded even the parameters of the debate that had been agreed to by his people. And I don't blame Biden for then getting provoked, because if I myself were making submission and time again, he kept, I kept being interrupted, I would lose my cool, because it interferes with your thought process, and yet you need to concentrate on what you are saying. I blame President
Trump.
Trump
Trump.
for uh, the way the debate degenerated into a marketplace shouting match. Look, I have been following debate since the Kennedy-Nixon debate of 1959, I believe. That's when I've been following debates in the United States. And I was sufficiently interested that I will stay up through the night because of the 6 to 7 hour difference in our time, just to listen to them. There have been great debates. Kennedy Nixon, Obama, uh, Obama McCain, Reagan Carter. Um, Great debates where there was civility. You see, crudity is not a sign of strength, and civility is not a sign of weakness. I think President Trump just has got it wrong. Abuse is his language of discourse. And within that context, it's difficult to have a decent debate. Not at all.
Prof, I'll come back to the US point in a second, but there's a question here on YouTube that I think it would be important to get your response on. And this question says, in the context of Nigeria, is there something we can clearly call the national interest in Nigeria? Is there still an institution we can call national, including the armed forces? Is there anything that serves the people?
Well, that is one of the issues that bother Nigerians, substituting sectional interests for national interests and trying to force that down the throats of all Nigerians. The presidency is supposed to serve the national interest, and it's supposed to be an institution that represents the totality of the nation. The president is not supposed to be the president of a section of the nation. And this should be demonstrated by an inclusive worldview towards the totality of Nigerians, whether it is in the composition. I mean, people are, well, no, I listened to perhaps a submission earlier today, which I thought was, in a way, they perhaps did not understand the concept of national interest. The people who drew up the Constitution and called for federal character were not fools. They know the mischief they were addressing, because if not just the presidency alone, but all the institutions, all the national institutions are supposed to reflect the federal character. They put it in the Constitution. So to now say, no, 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 you shouldn't worry about whether, your own people are, are represented in the cabinet, or even the Federal Character Commission itself, that is supposed to monitor the implementation of the federal character itself, is lopsided. You can't do that. You cannot exclude people and then demand their patriotism and their national, and that they should be nationalistic. You can't. If they feel they're excluded, then you cannot demand their love, their patriotic love for the country. So it's national interest has to be an aggregation of all the interests of the country, an aggregation of all the interests of the country. You can't make stew from just, dropping in pepper. It's going to be tasteless. You've got to first of all decide what kind of stew you are going to have, and then put in all the ingredients that are needed to make that stew palatable. You don't run a country on you don't run a country based on sectional interests. It's like trying to fly a 747 on one engine. Eventually that plane is going to crash. You fly a jumbo jet on 4 engines. If there's problem with one, you probably could go on with 3. But to try and fly a jumbo jet called Nigeria on 1 engine, and then you decide that things are fine and that people should trust you, that your motives are fine. No, that's asking for the impossible.
Thank you for that, Prof. Thank you for that. We've got about 6 minutes to this last segment, and going back to the issue of the debates. 2 quick points that we want to address here, Prof. The first one being the whole issue of debates. Have they ever been enough to swing an election? And secondly, linked to that question, is does it really add value to the electoral process?
Please, before I answer your 2 questions, I think we should let our participants on this program You always call it a show. I always call it a program. On this program, understand that this is not our normal pattern. It's because Nigeria is celebrating 60 years. I think that's called a diamond independence celebration that we have devoted a lot of time to discussing Nigeria. It's not our usual pattern. So I hope this is not going to drive away our universal audience. Now to the questions you've asked. Well, you see, uh, drawing conclusions is always a hindsight activity. Um, During the Kennedy Nixon debate, most observers believe Kennedy won that debate, and that's part of what contributed to his election. They said the same thing in the debate between Reagan and Carter. They said the same thing in the debate between Obama and McCain, and between Obama and Senator during the second election, in any case. But I thought that Hillary Clinton clearly won the debate against Trump, but yet Trump went ahead to win the election because of the uniqueness of the Electoral College of the United States, which, believe me, actually, I think is an aberration to democracy. And really, the United States ought to find its way out of that contraption. I believe I have no view, and I don't think there is any study that shows that the debate affects the individual voting tendency of individuals. I don't think so. There is no such study. As I said, we will just look back after the result of the election to start analyzing the debate and the effect of the debate. But I don't think anything is lost if there is civility and if the debate is well handled. I see nothing wrong. I know a lot of American commentators are saying you can't do it, but I see nothing wrong in giving the power to moderators to switch off the microphone of anybody who is interrupting the other party or who is speaking beyond the time allocated. There's nothing wrong with that. But then they are saying, well, the moderators will be intruding too. Then why are the moderators there if they are going to allow the peculiar mess that happened a few days ago?
Prof, we also had another interview going on at not too far apart in New Zealand, where two ladies were also in a debate. How do you compare those two?
They were very civil. Um, they were very civil. They they were mature. Um, Even though I didn't watch the debate at the time it was taking place, but I've watched skips from it since then. That is the way the debate is supposed to be. Those are mature people, civilized people, conceding where other people have a point. Well, I won't be surprised if those two ladies, by the way, went to Oxford and therefore had been trained in the tradition of the Oxford debate. I doubt whether Trump knows where Oxford University is. So I enjoyed the debate in New Zealand. That's the way it's supposed to be.
Oh, fantastic. And on that note, we end the show tonight. Thank you all for all the comments on YouTube here. I can also see some comments on Facebook. Thank you so much for the participation. And as Prof mentioned, this is not our usual style, but this is celebrating Nigeria at 60, and therefore we dedicated this to Nigeria. Next week we'll be back to our usual format, taking programs from all across the countries of the world. Thank you for joining us this evening. Prof, do you have any last words for our viewers before we go?
Just to thank them, as usual, for their patience and their contribution in terms of the questions that they have sent in. I really appreciate their participation in our program.
So thank you very much, viewers. We'll see you again next week, same time, 7 p.m. We'll be on the program again. Thank you.